welcome to the York Festival of Ideas. Has anyone been to any other presentations so far? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Is everyone here from York? Oh, okay, I'm not. I actually work mostly remotely, so I come up to York 1 week, thank you, 1 week of the month, so it's always a real delight to be here on campus because most of the time I'm squirreled away in my house doing research on my own. So yeah, thank you for making the time today. Welcome to the HumanCoffee Shop. Shall we begin? Okay, so my name is Jes Hooper. I'm a postdoctoral research associate here at the University of York. And what that means is I am a researcher, so I don't have any of the kind of teaching responsibilities. And my research is based in anthropology, but it focuses on the relationship between humans and other animal species. That will come clear as we go on. For the past 6 years, I've been involved in a research project that is collaborative, interdisciplinary and international, and it's called the HumanCoffee Shop. So this research project wasn't instigated by me. It was instigated by two of my colleagues who I met when they came to me with this project. And they are two artists and they're based in Finland. We've also had contributions from biologists here at the University of York and also food scientists from the University of Brighton in Sussex. So it's been quite a collaborative and varied project. We are now in the final stage of our research, and I'm going to introduce to you what the outcome of that project was, or what it is. I will talk you through all of the key phases of this research and what we did to get to this point. But I wanted to share with you a little known fact. Well, you might know it, you might not. Not sure who here is involved in university things, but researchers and even artists are increasingly being encouraged, and I have to say it's mostly by our funders, to pursue projects that have a commercial output. And it's the commercial output of the research that I'm going to be sharing with you today. But first, let me set the scene. We have been concentrating, as you can probably guess, on the coffee industry. And specifically, we have been looking at questions surrounding what makes coffee the most desirable to consumers. So I'm thinking the kind of specialty coffee market. So this is the world's most expensive, most unique coffee varieties. But what is it that gives those coffee blends this unique status? What do people value when they're looking to have what they consider to be a unique experience? So when we look at the coffee industry, it's absolutely amazing to me that every single day over 2 billion cups of coffee are consumed. It's part of everyday routines for millions of people all over the world. Hands up here who's had their coffee today. Yeah, okay. So if you're like me, it might be a habit. It might be that you simply cannot function without that second or third cup of coffee in the morning. But for some people, it's more ritualistic. For some people, they want to have a really immersive experience. They want to know where their coffee was grown, who grew it, in what conditions. They want to know where they fit within that supply chain. Or they might simply just be interested in coffee that has a more unique or exclusive status. They might enjoy the brewing process. They might have specialist equipment. So actually it becomes much more of a immersive experience rather than just an energizing drink. But it is really an important part of our global economy. And this is where this idea of our commercial output starts to come in. But where did coffee come from? So the anthropologist in me really loves this story because to understand where coffee was first discovered, we have to go to Ethiopia in the 9th century. And it wasn't something that humans stumbled across themselves. It was actually their observations of goats. You all expected me to say that, right? So it was a farmer, and this is all oral legend because we don't have many written records from that time. But the story goes that a farmer saw his goats getting very hyperactive after eating coffee cherries. And interestingly, he noticed that every time they ate the coffee cherries, it was about 20 to 30 minutes later that they started to express this kind of hyperactive behaviour. And what we know today is that caffeine, which of course is highest in coffee compared to things like tea, is actually the fastest acting orally consumed psychoactive compound on the planet. This is why it's such an important part of our everyday lives. It's no kind of surprise that we have coffee breaks entered into our daily routines at work. Those weren't originally put into our kind of labour strategies for the benefit of people having a break and catching up with their colleagues. It was so that you could get an extra few hours of work out of your workforce. But I digress. We're going back to Ethiopia. The farmer noticed this coffee cherry is having this kind of magic effect. And so what he did is he started experimenting with eating the coffee cherries themselves. Then his local community started to do the same. And soon we do get records of coffee being consumed. And this was consumed not as the beverage that we know today, but it was actually eaten. And what they did is they got the coffee cherries and then they would grind it up into a pulp. They would smush it together with animal fat and roll it up into energy balls. Those energy balls were then eaten raw on long caravan journeys across Africa by Sufi pilgrims. So coffee starts to travel. It then starts to become a really important social phenomenon. People are really interested by this product. They want to have its benefits. And so that's when we start to see coffee being consumed as a drink. But of course, this takes a bit longer, because you have to prepare it. It needs to be roasted. We have to, we have lots of different kind of alchemy happening. So it takes longer. And because it takes longer, people start to have it stationary. And coffee becomes a really important social facilitator. And what we find is that people start to sit and drink their coffee. They are talking to their neighbours, where they may not have done before because they're getting that kind of pep from the coffee. And we see that coffee becomes a really important social and political phenomenon because whilst people are drinking their coffee, they're talking about politics and philosophy. This is exactly where we get our coffee shops that we know all over the world today. I think it's absolutely fascinating. But there is a darker history. Because if we look at the globalization of coffee, this is actually something that comes with slaves and sugar. And even today, yes, climate has a role to play. But if we look at the most popular countries that produce coffee, it's usually the low economy countries that are producing coffee, mostly for the benefit of the high income ones. Regardless, coffee has not had the same sort of dips and troughs as other products on the global economy. And that's because since the early 2000s, it's had continual growth. Now, this might be surprising, but it's because of the specialty coffee segment. This is the most expensive coffees. And according to the Specialty Coffee Association, the definition for specialty coffee is coffee or coffee experience that has unique characteristics. I think that's pretty open to interpretation, and that's where our product comes in. We have created the world's rarest coffee in the world. We have created a coffee that is the most unique in the world, and we've been doing lots of different experiments to kind of explore these characteristics. Our coffee, as you have probably guessed, is human coffee. This is coffee that is produced via the digestive enzymes of humans. This is a fermentation process. So our first phase is trialling production. Now, I said before that coffee is one of the fastest acting psychoactive compounds. It brings alertness of mood. It brings us that pep. But actually, overconsumption can be fatal. So we needed to make sure that actually this was a safe thing to be doing. It was at this point in the research that I actually had no idea this was all happening. The two artists had travelled out to Indonesia, which is the second largest coffee producing country on the planet. And they went out to coffee plantations. They worked with local farmers and they learnt what makes good coffee. So they went to a coffee farm that was producing specialty coffee. So it had very kind of renowned properties. It was very high grade, high quality coffee. And they learnt to tell the difference between the ripest coffee cherries and those that weren't quite ready. They then spent a significant amount of time picking the ripest of coffee cherries for consumption. In total, they picked about 500 coffee cherries. They put them in big vats and they took them back to their accommodation. They then spent 5 days swallowing each of those coffee cherries whole. The theory was that if you look at a coffee cherry, you have this kind of pulp fruit. The idea was that, and we do know that the human digestive system it's evolved over many, many years to be able to process all sorts of materials, from really high fibre content all the way through to our meat. So the theory was that all of that fleshy component of the coffee cherry would be absorbed by the body, but the coffee beans, and there's usually about 2 coffee beans inside, these are the pips, would pass through the anus into the feces hole. And that's exactly what happened. They then processed those coffee beans by washing them with cool water. So you have to do it through running water. They then place the coffee beans on bamboo mats where they are air dried for about 3 or 4 days. Let's talk about the safety of this, because like I said, eating coffee can be quite hazardous. What the artists ensured was that they were in physical and mental health before taking on this experiment. And they also took very detailed field notes the entire time they were there. So by the time they came to me with this project, they had copious amounts of records from this experiment. They had also recorded the entire thing, so they were talking to camera explaining what their symptoms were. By day 5, they had to cease the experiment because of health reasons. They had shaking, so they were suffering with tremors. They were getting increased irritability. They were getting very anxious. They said they felt like a caged animal, that they were pacing between eating the coffee cherries and really needing to go to the bathroom. And then by day 5, they had really severe abdominal cramps. So they ceased the experiment. Now, there was no set duration of time that they were looking to do this experiment for, and they were not trying to consume a set amount of coffee cherries. It was simply an experiment. Would we be able to do this? Could we utilise the human digestive system for production purposes? What they found is within 5 days, they could consume nearly all of those coffee cherries that they picked, and they produced 927 human coffee beans. Once ground, that's about 80 grams, which is the equivalent of 4 cups. We have the rarest coffee in the world. Just 4 cups. So already we know that we have ticked that box of exclusivity. Not anyone anywhere is going to be able to try this coffee. Phase 2. This is where I come in. So we needed to test the structural properties of the coffee beans because what was our theory? Our theory was that the coffee beans would be fermented inside the digestive tract. So we needed to see if there was evidence of this in the human coffee beans. So they sent me their human coffee. They also sent me a control sample. And now this is important. They sent me a control sample from the same plantation. So these were coffee beans that they had picked from the same plantation at the same time, literally from the same plants. So I had one control sample that hadn't been through the digestive tract, and I had one sample that had. I then took these beans to the University of Brighton, and I worked with food scientists in the lab to look at the structural surface of all of those coffee beans. It was an amazing, amazing experience because you can generate these really big, beautiful images by using scanning electron microscopy. So we essentially blew up the images of the surface of the coffee beans, and it took about 8 hours because we had to, we basically split the bean into quadrats of 4, and then you photograph each quadrat multiple times at different magnifications. We then spent 3 days comparing all of the images to try and compare the control sample with the human sample. What were we looking for? We were looking for evidence of enzymatic alteration. Our theory was that the coffee that had been through the human digestive system would have evidence of micropitting. Now, micropitting is teeny tiny microscopic holes. The theory being that protein is removed from the coffee bean by the digestive enzymes and absorbed in the body, which in theory would mean that there would be lower protein. Lower protein corresponds with lower caffeine, and lower caffeine can actually give you a coffee that is smoother in taste because it's less bitter. What did we find? We found evidence of micropitting, but only in the coffee that had been through the human. So we were one step closer to confidently saying that we could prove our hypothesis that the human digestive system could be used to alter the properties of coffee. But we needed to know whether there was actually anything chemically different, because this is where our taste is going to come in. So this is where we start using the assistance of the biology department here at the University of York. So I took another sample, and this is amazing. Like, we didn't have to give like whole cups of coffee. They can literally do these tests with like half a coffee bean. So I took the 2 samples to the biology labs here, and we wanted to know whether there was any chemical differences between human and non-human coffee. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the science behind this because, quite honestly, it goes way beyond my expertise. But I did want to include this because I want to share with you the main findings. And that's that human coffee had 2 markers of enzymatic alterations. First of all, it had higher levels in 2 fatty acid profiles. And second, it had lower total proteins. Now, this wasn't, I'll be honest, this wasn't statistically significant. Didn't get that 0.05% or whatever it is, but we could see the results. So we could see that, yes, we can prove that the human digestive system does result in lower protein, which means, hopefully, we have got a coffee that you can taste the difference with. Now, phase 4 is our taste test, which we haven't done yet. But before we do our taste test, we can start to speculate what this might look like as a commercial product. You know, we're at that stage in our research now that we need to start preparing our final reports to give back to our funders, and we need to say what it is that we plan on patenting in order to put out to the market. To understand what this might look like, we can do a little bit of a speculative exercise, because there are coffees on the market that utilise a very, very similar process. Now, you've probably realised that I did not start my research looking at human coffee. I actually started my research looking at Kopi Luwak, which is civet coffee. Has anyone come across civet coffee? Okay. So I will note this is the former most expensive and rare coffee in the world, because it obviously has been outdone by us. But what is civet coffee? Civet coffee was discovered about 300 years ago in Indonesia. And actually it does have a little bit of a dark backstory, because according to oral legend, it was the Dutch rulers who had taken over Indonesia at the time that they basically brought coffee with them. And they said to all of the local people, you need to start growing coffee plants. And this was for a cash crop. So suddenly you've got the entire Indonesian nation looking around and seeing coffee where there was no coffee before. This is the first time they've ever seen coffee plants, and yet everyone is now being instructed to grow it. But because it is a cash crop, they are forbidden to try it themselves. So they notice, quite ingeniously, that they're finding coffee beans on the forest floor. This is coming from civets. Civets are small carnivores. They look a bit like cats. They're not related to cats, but they're one of the most ancient forms of feliformia, so they do look quite cat-like. They can be the size of a cat, but they can actually be much larger. They are arboreal, so they live high up in the trees. They are elusive because they're solitary and nocturnal. So most people will never actually see civets in the wild. What local people will often say, so these are people that live in the forests alongside civets, they will say whether there is an abundance of civets in the area, not because they see them, but because they leave a trace. The poop falls from the trees, and so it litters the floor, but also they have a really strong kind of musky aroma, and the smell from their scent glands, which they use to mark their territories, can actually last in the air for up to 3 weeks after the civet has long gone. So they're these really kind of ghostly forest presence. Beautiful, beautiful animals. But anyway, what the locals realised at this time is that the civets were coming into the coffee plantations at night. They were selecting the ripest coffee cherries for consumption. They were then defecating those coffee beans, which passed into their feces hole, and then they would go off again come morning. So the local people, wanting to try coffee, rightly so, thought, well, the Dutch aren't going to want to have coffee that comes from shit. So they started to pick the coffee beans from the scat. It was only when, and I don't know how long this took, because the record's very, very patchy, but it was only when the Dutch noticed that the Indonesians were drinking coffee, but that coffee was coming from civets, that they then tried the coffee themselves. Because, of course, the Indonesian people didn't have anything to compare it with. But the Dutch drank the coffee and were, wow, this coffee is smoother in taste, it's less bitter and lower caffeine. It's really unique. Now, as time goes on, Kopi Luwak falls into the realm of legend because, rightly so, the Indonesian people start to be able to drink their own coffee, right? So they don't need to keep going to the scat of wild animals. So it becomes a bit of a legend. It's not really a tradition. Very, very few Indonesian people today will say that they've even tried civet coffee, but it is something that people are kind of aware of as part of their colonial history. Now, if we fast forward to the early 2000s, specifically 2007, Kopi Luwak is featured in a Hollywood film called The Bucket List with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. Now, I won't go into the story because I don't want to ruin it for anyone that hasn't seen it, but let's just say that Kopi Luwak had a really, really prominent part in that film and was a really important punchline. With that, millions of people who went to see that film are suddenly exposed to Kopi Luwak. They want to try it. They're very curious by this product. This got the attention of international media. It was featured in The Guardian. In fact, it's been featured in The Guardian several times. It was featured in National Geographic, The Washington Post, and then even on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And then suddenly it transforms. So it goes not just from an international press coverage or feature, it starts becoming quite important for popular media. YouTubers, influencers, it's all over social media. So it starts to gain a bit of a cult following. What this provided was an economic opportunity. There are 36 species of civets, and they are found across Southeast Asia. And very, very few of them are actually legally protected. those that are legally protected, they're not protected well. So it's very easy to either get permits to take these civets, or people just go out and do it because there's no consequence. So we have an animal that is widely found in countries that have a huge supply of coffee. We have the commercialization of Kopi Luwak. So what happens is Kopi Luwak is now made on an industrial scale. So these are photographs that I've taken. You can go to lots of different coffee farms across Southeast Asia that look like this, that are producing civet coffee. The amount of feces here is the equivalent of probably about 150 to 200 civets, and that's being produced every single day. So there's a huge opportunity economically because you can create this really expensive coffee. Kopi Luwak is sold for up to between $50 and $100 per cup, but you can make it in bulk. The civet coffee industry now operates across Southeast Asia, so it's not limited to Indonesia. These photos, for example, were taken in Vietnam. And the civet coffee industry is now the fastest growing segment of the specialty coffee market because it can so easily be produced at a very, very low input for huge financial results. In 2024, the civet coffee industry was estimated at $7.4 billion US, and it's also got a growth rate of 4.5%. This means by 2030, it will have exceeded $11.2 billion. That's a huge, huge, huge amount of profit. Wildlife farming across Southeast Asia is actually now more cost effective than traditional farming practices. You can see why people might be interested in pursuing this line of business. But commercial viability relies on low investment for the highest potential return. What if we looked at this from the cost of other species? Now, in order to create civet coffee most economically, you need to provide as little materials to those farms as possible. Civets are really territorial. They will fight to the death if you house them together. So they are housed separately, but they're housed separately in cages that typically measure no more than 1 meter squared, some much smaller, and they are literally stacked in warehouses. So they can smell each other, they can see each other, it's just extremely stressful. They're also housed in warehouses that are managed by humans, and we are diurnal, so they are exposed to bright lights, lots of noises, lots of daytime activity, when actually in the daytime that's when they should be sleeping. Now, we have also designed all of these cages so that there is ease of collection of the feces. So they're usually made with bars or wire mesh, which actually bite into the animal's feet and cause bleeding. They often have trap injuries, they don't get veterinary care because all of these things are expensive. But all of these welfare provisions are more likely to be found in livestock that is domesticated, but there isn't the legislative requirements to give that to the wild species. Now, it's also having huge environmental output. So the commercial civet coffee trade is now contributing to what we call the empty forest syndrome. So I've gone to these forests before, and my background's actually conservation. And so I was really excited to go and see these kind of biodiverse hotspots that are, world famous for being absolutely incredible. And I got there and it was literally silent. It's terrifying. It's just absolutely terrifying. And snares are also very, very economic. They're designed to be cheap and lightweight, so you can have 100 of them on your back. You walk into the forest because there's roads going everywhere in the forest now, and it doesn't matter if you don't catch anything or never go back to collect them because these are a couple of pence each. So we've got a huge environmental problem here. And also, what about the workers? Now, You may have heard about civets because of civet coffee, but you might also recall civets appearing in the media during COVID. They were actually put on lots of different like newspapers and things. Like, they were the kind of image of the pandemic for a while, where we didn't know what species it came from, because they were the vectors of SARS, COVID's predecessor, which emerged from civet farms in China in 2002 to 2004. That disease killed 774 people across 29 different countries. And disease can be shed in feces. And we are asking farmers and their communities to handle civet feces en masse every single day. And it's completely legal to purchase that here in the UK because it's safe to drink. We looked at commercialising our human coffee. We looked at the health and safety requirements. So we actually rang. We sent lots of emails and they did get ignored, but we did make some phone calls, and we managed to get hold of some officials from the food and health agencies in Finland and here in the UK. And we said, hypothetically, if we were to market or patent this product, could we produce it? Could we sell it to people? And the answer was yes, because when you roast coffee, it kills 99.9% of all bacteria, so it's completely safe to consume. They didn't ask us once, well, what about the poor who are having to consume the coffee in the first place? So why have we been making human coffee? You've probably guessed by now, it isn't a legitimate commercial enterprise we're trying to create. The reason the artists started this research is because they were doing a project called Collective Perversion, and they were looking at the societal perspectives of bodily waste. Mostly they were looking at toilet systems and the kind of flushing of urine with drinking water and things like that. They came across Copy Luwak, which was very out there. It was very kind of paradoxical to societal disgust of waste. And they noticed that it was actually the feces of civets that was being romanticised. And it was people's kind of disgust and curiosity about the fact it came from shit that made people want to try it. And so they thought, well, let's start experimenting with this idea. They're performance artists, so it was quite natural for them to use their bodies as an experimental tool. And I was brought into the project because of my research with civet coffee. They wanted to understand more about the cultural significance, the economic kind of scalability, and the animal and environmental consequences. Because we've been doing this project for so long now, 6 years, this has also led to us looking at the issue of scalability and the commerciality that is always put upon artists and researchers as a pressure. So we're always being told you need to have something that you can patent, you need to have something that you can have profit for. So yeah, that is where it began. But did we make human coffee? Yes, we did. Did we do all those experiments? Yes, we did. Have I lied to you today at all? No, I haven't. We have got 4 cups and we do want to do a taste test. So, my last question to you all today. Does anyone here really want a crap cup of coffee? That is the end of the presentation. So, so, we do not have real human coffee with us today. We do have clearance that it can be consumed, and we are hoping to complete a taste test. My main purpose of this setup today is to gauge people's reactions. Can I just ask for a show of hands, who would try it if it was here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God, that's most of you in the room. Okay, why?
Well, I tasted hackle in Iceland, which is
Okay.
shark.
Yeah.
I do go for things like that.
Yeah. So you've got you're drawn to
Oh yeah,
the
it's
yeah.
a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were telling a lie about that. I heard about it. So I thought it was just a lot of rubbish actually.
No, completely legitimate. Yeah.
I enjoyed tasting coffee that's been had the mucilage removed in many different ways. You
Yeah.
get lots of different tastes.
Yes.
Really challenges what coffee is.
Yeah. And you would try the human
Yeah,
coffee?
that indeed.
Yeah.
Would be interesting.
Yeah. So in theory then, if I was to set up a workshop that is a cupping exercise, we would get in a professional roaster and we would do the cupping all professionally. Would I have volunteers in this room to...
Yes.
Is that to taste it or to produce the bean?
to taste it? We've got some volunteers to produce it as well. It's amazing who comes out the woodworks at these seminars.
I thought, when would it happen? When would it happen? Next month or 2 months?
Oh, probably not that soon. I'm actually going out to Vietnam to carry on with my research with civet coffee. So I'll be back in August. So probably the next academic semester. So the autumn would be when we could put that together.
How would
Yeah.
people know? I don't have a computer, you see. How would you let people know?
Oh, how did you find out about this event?
Oh, well, for festival ideas, you see.
Okay, well, we can organise it through them, I'm sure. Yeah. I think also we'll probably have everyone's details of who attended, so we can just keep you all. I'm getting nods from the back there, so yeah, we can reach out to anyone that's in this room right now to say exclusive experience on the table. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
When the artists first reached out to you,
Yeah.
was kind of trying to figure out a common language, quite like figuring out what they wanted from you, being able to speak about the project. Like, I know it's been going on for a while, but like trying to find that common ground, was that really hard?
We recorded it and it's the most hilarious video to watch back. So this all happened in COVID and they had sent me an email. So I have a website all about my research and they'd found it and they were looking for an anthropologist that was studying civet coffee. Turns out I'm the only one, right? So they sent me an email and it was really shady. It was like, who is your funder? We want to know more about it. Blah. And I was just like, this seems weird, like getting very strange vibes from this, so I ignored it. And then about 2 weeks later, they emailed again saying that, and I was asking for research participants at the time, because my research had obviously been cancelled, I couldn't go out to Indonesia. So I had a call on my website saying, if you've tried civet coffee, please consider being interviewed as part of my research. And so they emailed again and said, if you meet with us, we'll tell you about our experience. And I was like, okay, well, I hadn't got any interview participants at that point. So I was like, yeah, okay, we'll meet online. And they were really, really, really like standoffish to the point where I'm like, I don't understand why you've asked me here because you're not bringing anything. And like, I feel like I've kind of put you on edge. And it turns out that when they first got their funding through, they were interviewed by a really prominent newspaper in Finland because they'd got this huge prestigious grant, multi-year grant that artists really clamour for. And their project was about urine and faeces and society's perceptions of it. And so it got quite a bit of press interest. They'd met with a journalist who gave the impression she was really interested in the project, but actually then published a kind of slanderous piece with images of the artist, like caricatures, painting with shit. And so they were really nervous about talking to anyone new about their experiment because they hadn't told anyone yet that they'd actually engaged with their own waste to create coffee. And so they were gauging whether I was going to completely shut them down or was going to run off to the press or call the police or whatever it might be. But we kind of had this conversation for about 10 minutes. No, longer than that. But anyway. And you can see in the video, watching it back, that they're getting more and more relaxed. And at one point you see one of them slide a note to the other and then they tell me. And I just burst out laughing. I was like, this is brilliant, let's do it. But yeah, so I can see why they were nervous. But we could break that barrier down pretty quickly.
Was it Finland, you say?
Yeah, Finland.
Are they a funny race?
I think, I don't know, you said you would drink the human coffee, so I think all humans are a bit odd.
Well, we were told by Russia that
Well, they didn't want to drink too much coffee after this
Oh,
experiment.
no.
Do you know how the control coffee was depulped? Because depulping itself brings many different things to the process, because you can do yeasts, for example, which presumably have some biological activity and could change.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Honey, you can do honey.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, the fruit was just simply removed by hand, and then
the normal way.
No.
Right.
And then the other thing that we did do, which I didn't talk about, is we ran bacterial tests. So we created gels in the lab here at York to see how much bacteria was growing on the green coffee beans. And we actually had to run that test twice, because the first time it came back that there was no bacteria. And the lab literally rang me up and was like, "Did you bleach this?" And I was like, "I can assure you we didn't." But we think that the way that we stored the coffee beans at the point that it was basically too long, that they were too old and the bacteria was dead. So it's still inconclusive as to how dangerous it would be to handle the beans in their raw form before they're roasted. Yeah.
And do you know if any specific enzyme is responsible in the gut for anything? That's, I guess, a lot more research.
Well, this is the interesting thing. Every experiment we did, we copied from research that has been published for civet coffee. And every single publication that we looked at with these tests had methodological flaws. So, and then when we started looking into who was publishing it, it's usually researchers from Indonesia who were employed by the coffee companies. So again, we have a whole new rabbit hole to go down. So yeah, and I mean, we did find micro-pitting, and yes, we did find lower protein, but everything was so marginal and subjective that it's quite disgusting that there is so much research out there saying that yes, that civet coffee is unique, when if you actually take that research to people that really understand those methods, they kind of laugh it out the door. But yet the industry will cite scientifically tested. Here, go and see this journal article.
I'm just thinking you could separate the coffee from the shit by fermenting it with a human enzyme.
Yes, yeah. When they've done that with,
the whole thing.
What's interesting is they have done that with civets, and there is a synthetic enzyme that can be used, but people don't want to drink it because people want it to come from the shit. So it's, there's a lot to unpack. Yeah, go ahead.
Just with what you mentioned regarding like other researchers and previous research, what's been, like, how has current academia received this, all the research that you're doing? Like, what's been the opinions from like scholars or other academics in the field?
Oh, it was interesting. Our first paper, so we published a peer-reviewed paper called Embodied Empathy with Coffee Producing Civets. And the entire thing was us basically having a provocation that civets are experiencing the same level of psychosis, essentially, from overconsumption of caffeine that humans are. And so we used a lot of the diary entries from the 5 days of the artists consuming the coffee to create a kind of narrative of this is what the body goes through. And then we problematized the commercialization of civet coffee. That paper was published in the Journal of Transpositions, which is an interdisciplinary journal. And so it went to peer reviewers that were in the arts and humanities, but it also went to like biological scientists. And we were so thrilled with the feedback. It's the only time I've ever had a manuscript just accepted. And both of the reviewers, even though they came from completely different disciplines, were really encouraging in their feedback, saying that actually it's this type of kind of out there, bold research that we need to be supporting more. So yeah, it has been really well received, which was great for the artists because it meant they had a positive experience after the first one. We also did a art exhibition, so we had a month exhibition in Helsinki, and the same newspaper that originally published the kind of slanderous piece, named it Art Meets Science in like the best way possible or something, and they got 5-star reviews from the same newspaper. So we are changing perspectives, but it just goes to show that it's such a nuanced topic. You have to give it space to breathe, and you have to have kind of workshops and seminars like this to get people to really understand it. Because if you just say we've made human coffee, it is either a complete novelty or people just have a kind of gut reaction to it and don't understand exactly what we're trying to do. But yeah, the scholarship has been very well received, which is great.
You know, in my mind, anyway, it's quite an exclusive or expensive product, the civet coffee. So we're seeing it's an expensive price point, but it looks like it's fairly mass produced.
Mm-hmm.
According to what you're showing us, which is kind of a business guy's dream, obviously.
Yeah.
So who are the people who are buying it, and where are they based? Are they people who are in like a Dubai hotel who's doing it as an extreme one-off activity once in their life, or are people who are buying a kilo of it a week? Where are they?
Yeah. So the majority of civet coffee is actually purchased in the countries that it's produced, but not by people that live there. It's international tourists. So it's a completely tourist-driven industry. So you can go to civet coffee plantations where you've got 4 or 5 civets in a cage. You can feed them the coffee cherries. You can have your photo taken with one. Most of the time they're drugged, or they're babies that have just been taken from their mothers. And then you're encouraged to buy a packet as you leave as a souvenir. But go anywhere in Southeast Asia and just open your eyes in the lobbies in airports. It's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. Like you can't move in Southeast Asian airports without coming across civet coffee. So that's the biggest one. There are retailers here in the UK that sell it. You can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on Etsy. These are not people that have brought a packet home from holiday. These are businesses that are using e-commerce platforms as part of their supply chain. So it is pretty much, if you imagine all the different options, it's infiltrated all of them. But mostly it's driven by tourism. Yeah.
You can't get in York, can you?
You can't get?
In York, can you? Where is it in York?
Only online, I think.
So on that, the only time we've had it is when our sister went to Bali and brought
Yeah.
it back. But it was pitched as this is like some kind of rescue. They're not in cages. It's Is that just like nonsense?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, so I've actually got a paper in review at the moment that's looking at exactly this. We did a research project where we were basically investigating those claims. We looked at 500 different brands of civet coffee, and 35% of them had a claim that they were 100% wild collected, cage-free, certified, etc., etc. There is no authentication method in existence to tell if that has ever seen a civet before. There's also no certification scheme, right? We then looked at all of the companies that had been named as certifiers. World Animal Protection, WWF, Rainforest Alliance, really big names that most consumers would recognise as being pro-animal welfare or pro-environment, and so would trust it. And they literally stamp those labels on. But we now have evidence literally on the record that those companies do not endorse civet coffee, have no affiliation with those brands, and they've now started legal proceedings to get their name removed. But we were only doing this research for a snapshot in time. So we basically looked at 500 in the space of like 2 months, and then we finished the project. So you can imagine that that's only a fraction of the market. So 35% of 500 is a lot, but that's nothing compared to what's actually out there. So in answer to your question, yeah, that is all complete shit, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Civets, are they endangered in the wild? Are they going to be? Are they a threatened species?
Yeah. So this is where it gets complicated. The civets that are used for coffee most frequently are common palm civets, mast palm civets. They are listed as least concern on the IUCN. However, I run the civet working group as part of the IUCN specialist group for small carnivores. And so we're responsible for reviewing those classifications. They are outdated by over 10 years. They no longer reflect the current situation, particularly given that civet coffee commercialisation only really started to gain momentum in the early 2000s, and we're just seeing the real benefit, like the risk of that now. So whilst on paper they are least concern, we don't have the data to back that up. So currently, one of the things our group is working on is looking at the trade data of civets, looking at the scale of the civet coffee industry, looking at where it's produced, how many animals are in those farms, where they're coming from, and we need to basically prove that there is a significant risk that if this industry continues, there will be a 30% loss of the population, in which case it will trigger them changing in status, and then they would get protection. But it's very difficult to do that because there's very few researchers in the world that are dedicating that much time to looking at these species, particularly because civets, being least concern, don't get any funding. So everyone is doing this in their own time. But it's pretty much the consensus of conservationists that the assessments are not accurate. And there are already species that are listed as endangered. So this one, for example, stripy fella, is an Ostern civet. They can only be found in the top of a mountain range in Vietnam. And if you look at that range on a map, the entire 360 surrounding is all civet coffee farms. And they're getting those civets from those mountains. So this particular species is already locally extinct in pretty much 95% of its range. And the only place on earth you can still find them is the hotspot for creating civet coffee. These guys don't even eat coffee beans. They eat insects. But what happens is they're caught by the traps. And they either die in the traps, or because they're so rare, they're really, really valuable, either for their pelts, either to be eaten or as pets. And so they're actually found in civet coffee farms who are smuggling them into the black market. So there's just, the knock-on effects to this industry are so huge in whichever direction you look at it. Yeah. Let's leave it there then. Oh, sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, just with the pictures of like the civet coffee farms with the giant things, all the coffee beans.
Mm-hmm.
Does it smell awful, or is it kind of?
So civets smell awful. Like I said, their scent can linger for like 3 weeks. It doesn't smell great, but the cages is where it really stinks. When you've actually got it all kind of lined up on display, it's out in the open, it's in the air, and it dries very, very quickly because of the climate. So no, I wouldn't say, you wouldn't notice the smell just seeing the civet feces in those types of trays. But when you walk through a farm where you've got the civets in cages, you gag. Like your eyes hurt because of the level of ammonia. It's really, really unpleasant. Yeah.
It's the cost of the civets, isn't it, I guess, because in the wild, as you penetrate, they're well separated from their shits from the trees, and there you are forcing them to cohabit with it.
Yeah. And then, in order to be economic, they don't clean the cages thoroughly. What they tend to do, I mean, I've been to some where they clearly don't clean them at all, but in others, they take all the trays out from underneath the cages, so all of the feces is removed and kept safe, and they come in with a hose, and they literally just hose down all of the civets in the cages. So you can imagine how stressful that would be, but that is their cleaning procedures. So one of the things I'm doing at the University of York at the moment is establishing a new project where we're looking at the One Health implications and trying to increase the biosecurity and the hygiene in the civet farms to keep the human population safe. because we're not getting the funding from conservation grants, and animal welfare grants only go so far, and they're not going to support us unless we're shutting down the farms, which I would love to do, but there's a lot of work to do to ensure that people's livelihoods are secured, but we do need to make them safer, because the next pandemic will be coming from these guys for sure. So yeah, we're looking into health as our hopeful silver bullet. Yeah.
So what's your name?
I'm Jes Hooper. Yeah.
Is there any way that we can follow your work?
Yes.
Can you put that out?
Yes.
On social media or?
So I actually have a charity called the Civet Project, and it's where we run a lot of this research through. So we take charitable donations, and then we use those donations to go out to the countries and document what we're seeing, and setting up the working group with the IUCN and that kind of thing. So if you literally type my name into Google, it will come up, civets. Yeah.
I don't have any computer at all. So, is it University of York where you're based at?
Yes.
Which department?
Archaeology.
Oh,
Archaeology, yeah. I'm based in the Centre for Heritage for Global Challenges Research Centre.
Heritage, Global.
Challenges Research Centre.
Whereabouts is that?
Well, at the moment, we're based in Kings Manor,
Oh, right.
but we'll be moving soon. So when I get back from field work, we'll be based here on campus.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask the information where you are.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to do that too, because I'm going to have no idea.
That's the Jes Civet lady.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks.